This section of the communication training is answering questions. You'll probably notice that I'm not in my customary polo shirt, and I have my business partner here, Chris Lopez. And the reason why we decided to do this video this way is we wanted to make it real. So, hey, this is the way we are. We're t-shirt guys. This is the way most people in our circle of influence are. And so what we're trying to demonstrate here is having candid conversations, and one of the ways we demonstrate that, answering questions, is obviously a candid situation. People ask a lot of questions, and a lot of times they're surrounded by misconceptions on the MLM network marketing industry. And so what I wanted to do with this video is not just give you some script and the way I would say something, because you can pretty much find that anywhere out there. We wanted to actually talk about like the subject matter and talk about, what do we feel about these misconceptions? What do we say? What are some ideas back and forth? We felt like that would be more useful to you. So we're going to start with the first misconception, and that's the general network marketing. Is that like a pyramid? And really that can mean a lot of different things. So I'll ask you, Chris, first, when a contact asks you, like, was that like one of those pyramid things, or like, what do you say? First, what are you thinking, and then what do you say when you're talking to them?
The funny thing is, I was actually thinking this about 10 seconds before you asked me the question, is that I actually can't remember the last time I got this question asked to me. And you and I talked about this right before the video. And one of the things we want to emphasize in this video is that once you truly believe in the company you're representing, the network marketing industry, and what you're doing, that will eliminate probably about 90% of the objections or more. There's that old joke of that whatever you're thinking, like, oh my gosh, I hope my prospect doesn't ask me this or doesn't ask me this. It's like wearing a Post-it note on your forehead that says, ask me, is this a pyramid? And then you kind of get stuck in your tracks or caught up like that. And so that's why I literally cannot remember the last time I was asked, is this a pyramid, or is this illegal, or is this a Ponzi scheme, or anything like that. And I used to in my first year or two in the business, but once I did my research, attended my company's conventions and various training events, training calls on a weekly basis, I knew this was a absolutely legitimate business. And once I started believing that, I really didn't have the question asked of me anymore. So the first thing to keep in mind and that you'll want to do is really do your research and do what you need to do so you truly know and you truly believe that network marketing is not only legal, but it's actually one of the best business forms out there. I think you said earlier it's probably the purest business form.
I always say it's the purest business model for a multitude of reasons. Yeah.
And so if I do get this question, or if you ever get this question, the first thing I would say is, well, if someone says this is a pyramid scheme, I'd say, well, what exactly do you mean? Because before I even start answering the question, you want to make sure you understand what the person is actually asking. Because the person may say pyramid and mean it in the legal sense, or they may say pyramid and mean it in the sense of like the more network marketing style, or just the fact that everything's a pyramid essentially, and that, the people doing the most work, the people at the top, make more money. So you want to actually understand what they're asking first so you don't answer the wrong question. That's one of the biggest, I'd say, rookie mistakes out there. And I guarantee you half the time if you say, well, what do you mean by a pyramid thing? Or what do you mean by a pyramid? They'll look back to you and say, I don't really know.
A lot of times what it is they say something like, well, those things where you get somebody and then they get somebody and they get somebody. And a lot of times they don't even, it's not like they have a negative connotation to it. Like people here in MLM, they hear pyramid and they think, oh my God, my contact, they hate it. And oh, here we go again. And like, I'd say 9 out of 10 times, it's really people, that's just how they think of it. And they don't have a negative impression. That's just how they describe it. They don't have the terminology. So they go, hey, it's one of those pyramid things, right? And I said, what do you mean by that? And they're like, oh, well, it's the thing where you get somebody and you get somebody. They don't have a problem with it. And for the most part these days, if we were 15 years ago, a lot of times people had a thing about network marketing or MLM. They thought it was like a pyramid, like illegal.
Yeah.
Most people now have enough common sense to know that it's not illegal because they know, like the company we're in publicly traded on the New York Stock Exchange. And there's a lot of companies that are traded on the NASDAQ and Warren Buffett, somebody else you said
Richard
big.
Branson.
He's another guy. I mean, why would these people be doing and investing in why would they be investing in an MLM company if it was an illegal thing? It's not. So most people know that it's not. So generally when they ask this, it's more of a descriptive term for them. So what you need to determine is, are they just using the term to describe it, or are they negative on it? Or maybe they're kind of in between. They just don't understand. Like, you need to figure out, is there some issue there, or is there no issue? If there's no issue, you don't need to deal with it, and don't get your panties in a bunch, if you will, over them saying it,
Well, I also find a lot of times, you say, figure out is it negative, positive, or what the misconception is. But a lot of people, they like the idea of network marketing. So a lot of people have been in network marketing sometime in their lifetime. They like the idea. They're like, yeah, I like the idea, but XYZ I didn't like about my last time, or it just didn't work for me. So half the time they're trying to figure out, is it network marketing, and what you're doing, how can it actually help them make money? So once you figure it out, what they're asking and what their experience is, if they have any, you can answer the question and give them, a short story or short answer. Like if someone has done network marketing in the past, so they say, I did something like that, about 5 years ago, or my wife did something like that a number of years ago. And, like in concept, it sounded good, but we just hated having to drive around to hotel meetings every Tuesday and Thursday, or whatever. You might have to ask what they didn't like about it, or what didn't work for them is a great question. And then find out, then explain how what you're doing is different, or how this time can actually help them out.
Well, yeah. And I always used to do the analogy when, training downline, I always say, like, you have a mental picture in your mind as to what you're doing. Why? Because you're doing it. What's what we do. And they have a mental picture in their mind of what they did, or maybe what they've experienced with somebody else. You need to figure out what that mental picture is in your head before you start talking. Because then it may be like a multitude of things as to why. Really what this comes down to, and you bring up a good point, Chris, is this concern, misconception, question, whatever you want to call it. A lot of times, if it's not, I don't want to say negative, but if there's an issue here that you need to deal with, a lot of times it really isn't network marketing itself. It's what comes with network marketing and the experiences that people have had, either because they've done it themselves, or maybe they've been on the receiving end of somebody who've done it. And so you need to figure out what concern or misconception you're really leading to, because normally this isn't the one anymore. This is just like, think of network marketing now as a big umbrella. And there's a lot of issues that it causes as far as people what think about it. And people usually know what MLM is, multi-level marketing, network marketing. They don't dislike it if they dislike it because of the business model. It's usually what's done around it. So it could be people thinking that they need to be a salesperson, or running around at meetings like it used to be done, or trying to think.
Inventorying $2,000 worth of product.
You need to figure out like really what's going on, because it's usually not network marketing itself. So, don't get all tied up in this objection and this concern or question, whatever you want to call it. A lot of times it's just another misconception buried under another misconception, and you got to dig. That's why you're right. You got to ask and figure out what that mental picture is. What's really going on that's making him say that?
And the thing, whenever someone gives you a misconception or objection like this, the best thing to do is ask them a question first, like a clarifying question, or to really understand what they're going after, to actually make sure you're answering the right question. I know when I first got in the business, I would hear a question and I would go off into this great 2-minute scripted rant and tell them the best answer in the world. And then I would find out a couple months later it was the wrong question. And I usually open up a can of worms for like 5 other questions. And then
You created a whole new problem for yourself. Well, the last thing I'll say on this one, and unless you have any closing comments, but something that comes to mind that I see a lot of people mistake is they think that this cutesy little response is always the best way to go. Like, oh, well, corporate America is the real pyramid. I mean, that stuff just doesn't work. Like, it's condescending. It's stupid, and people have heard it before. Don't do that. You're right. Get the clarifying question out. Have they done it before? Have they not? Are they talking about somebody else? Were they just on the receiving end of that? Or did they actually do the bit? Like, what is causing all this? In other words, what's the underlying issue? And, resolve it. Don't spit out something because you think you know. Never assume you know what the person's saying.
That's a great point to take away with. Then the last thing I actually wrap up with, or say before we wrap up, is that some people will say, once you ask them, well, what do you mean by a pyramid thing? Well, they'll say, well, isn't it where all the people at the top make the money? And it's not a negative question. It's more they just don't know, or the way our education and job system works, where we're used to, if I have a job, my boss will make more money. His boss will make more money. Yeah. His boss will make more than him. So sometimes they're just asking like, well, that's just where people at top make all the money. And they're really asking is, well, how can I, get my fair share? Or how can I make money from this as well? And so I always use an analogy to performance-based. So I like to use a gym analogy or like a sports analogy because that's my background. And I'll say, well, the nice thing about the way this model works is if you actually do the work, you will get paid for it. If you don't do anything, you won't. It's kind of like going to the gym. You can only fake it at the gym so much before the results don't show. But if you put the time in, you put the work in, you go in 3 days a week, whatever your routine is, you'll get the results. Or it's sport, if you practice harder and do better, you'll get better, and then your team will do better, or you'll get paid more, or whatever. So I always like to focus it back on performance-based, and depending on your background, and maybe the person's background you're talking with, you'll use a different analogy to show them that, hey, bottom line is if you do some work, you'll get paid. You do nothing, you get nothing. You do a lot, you get a lot.
Which isn't always the case in jobs.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can think of, and you said this in the other video, but I can think of numerous times when I worked summer jobs. I did a lot of construction in high school and early college because that was, paid the best hourly wage on summer breaks and holiday breaks. And that's a very results-oriented business. You either are doing something like, hey, I painted that room or I built that wall, or you're not. And some people would just not do anything, and I'd be busting my butt, pulling out old insulation or hanging up a wall. And I'd be like, well, why the heck is this guy, I'm picking up his slack. But it's just the way things are.
Mm-hmm. And in this business, the nice thing is if you're a hard worker and you're the one that's always doing the work, or you're the person at work going, why is that person making as much or more than me? And I said that in one of the other videos, this is for you. Hey, you're tired of that. You want to be the one that gets paid the money. Those are the people on the top. Whereas in jobs, in corporate America, in normal environments, sometimes, I wish it wasn't this way, sometimes it's politics. Sometimes it's somebody who, kisses the most what and all of that. That does not work here. Like, you have to be a hard worker. So if you're a hard worker, this is going to be for you. And think about that when you're talking to people. Just remember all these points. And, you can watch this part of the video over and over again and never have a problem with this concern, objection, question again.
I got nothing else to throw in there.
No,
so I guess.
no. This is good.
Yeah, so rewatch this video if you need to, like Jason said. And remember, get your own belief in here first so you truly believe in the industry and the company you're working with. And train yourself so when someone asks you, is this a pyramid, or any of the other questions that we'll go over, before you jump into a scripted response or any response, ask a clarifying question or two to make sure you actually are going to answer the right question that they have.
One last thing. I know we keep saying that, but general rule is usually it takes 3 clarifying questions before you get to the really root. That's just a general rule of thumb, and don't make it always 3. It can be 2, it can be 4, it can be 5. But generally, if you haven't asked 3 clarifying questions, you really haven't got to the root of what's really going on. So with that, that's it for this video.